As my heir, William now assumes the Scottish titles which have meant so much to me. He succeeds me as Duke of Cornwall.
There are few relationships within the royal family that elicit more conjecture and gossip than that of Princess Anne and Camilla Parker Bowles.
Who really holds the strings inside the royal palace, the king or those closest to him? At 76, Charles should be standing tall as monarch, yet whispers say his strength has been shaken. In hushed tones, courtiers speak of a private confrontation that left him with tears in his eyes. And at the center of it all stands not a foreign power, not Parliament, but his own family, William and Anne. For years, rumors circled that Camilla's children were quietly gaining space in the royal circle. Their names appeared at dinners, their presence noted in photographs, and questions began to rise. Were they becoming part of the crown's future? Some said it was harmless, others believed it was dangerous. Now, that silent struggle has finally erupted. Reports tell of a meeting so tense that Charles, the king himself, was forced to choose between duty and his wife's wishes. William's voice was firm, Anne's gaze unshaken, both demanding the same. The influence of Camilla's family must end, and it must end now. What followed has changed the balance inside the monarchy forever. Stay with us, because the truth behind this confrontation is more dramatic than anyone could have imagined. The quiet rise of Camilla's children. Even before the dramatic confrontation that would shake Buckingham Palace, Camilla's children were slowly but steadily making their presence felt within royal circles. Laura Lopes, with her poised elegance, appeared at art exhibits, charity galas, and high-profile cultural events.
Among the guests were Camilla's children, Laura Lopez and Tom Parker Bowles. Charles's new stepchildren were included in the official royal family portrait taken at the time,
where senior royals were in attendance. She never demanded the spotlight, yet palace insiders consistently noted her presence. Tom Parker Bowles, quieter in public settings, moved almost unnoticed, yet he too attended gatherings where important discussions happened informally. On the surface, everything seemed like polite family inclusion, a stepmother's children participating in family affairs. But those who watched closely began to notice patterns. Their involvement, though subtle, hinted at something more strategic, a slow embedding into the very structure of the monarchy. Laura's constant proximity to key decision-makers raised questions. She didn't speak loudly, she didn't command attention, but her steady presence meant she was always near discussions and gatherings where influence quietly circulated. Tom, though less visible, had his own way of being present in moments where informal influence could be exerted behind-the-scenes conversations, private dinners, and introductions to royal aides who handled logistics and planning. Insiders began whispering that this wasn't happenstance. Was Camilla carefully positioning her children within royal spaces, not by inheritance, not by bloodline, but by subtle, deliberate strategy? For generations, the monarchy had functioned according to a set of rules that were unwritten but deeply respected. Access to the monarch and the inner circles came primarily through birth, through years of loyal service, or by formal royal appointment. These rules ensured that power and influence remained carefully controlled, preserving the integrity of the crown and the family legacy. Camilla's children, in their quiet ways, began bending those rules. They were crossing invisible boundaries without breaking them outright, causing unease among those who upheld the traditional Windsor hierarchy. Prince William, observing every gesture and interaction, quickly noticed the pattern. Every shared laugh between Laura and senior aides, every nod in informal conversations, every subtle handshake in ceremonial events, all of it was more than mere etiquette. To William, these small actions added up to a quiet assertion of influence, a soft but undeniable push toward positions they hadn't officially earned. What the public might see as innocent family interactions were, from his perspective, potential threats to the long-established structure of the monarchy. The tension wasn't just about social appearances or protocol, it was about maintaining the very foundation of what the crown represented. By quietly embedding themselves into key royal settings, Camilla's children were testing the limits of acceptance and patience within the palace. They were reshaping perceptions without overtly challenging anyone, yet the ripple effect of their actions reached every corner of royal influence. For those loyal to the Windsor bloodline, this was more than unsettling, it was a direct challenge to the traditions and respect that had governed the monarchy for centuries. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, Camilla's children were moving from the periphery to the edge of the monarchy's inner workings, forcing a reckoning that would ultimately lead to confrontation. William's growing concern. Prince William, bearing the immense weight of his mother's legacy and the future of the monarchy,
William has proven his readiness for his future role by shouldering more responsibilities on the Queen's behalf.
Couldn't ignore the subtle, creeping influence of Camilla's children. Every appearance they made, every polite interaction at royal events, seemed to him like a quiet assertion of presence, an unspoken challenge to the natural order he had been raised to protect. Laura's polished demeanor at charity dinners, her ability to blend effortlessly with senior royals, made it appear she belonged in spaces she had never officially earned. Tom, meanwhile, remained understated in public, but his access behind the scenes, the informal advice, the connections with aides, and the soft influence in planning gatherings created ripple effects that William watched with growing unease. What might seem trivial to outsiders was, to him, a creeping encroachment that threatened centuries-old traditions. For William, this issue was intensely personal. He often thought about Diana, his mother, and the battles she had fought not with ambition, but with dignity and a deep sense of fairness. She had insisted that the monarchy must uphold service, merit, and responsibility, not just bloodline, and she had strived to protect her children's rightful place in a system that valued duty alongside heritage. Watching Camilla's children move steadily into roles close to royal decision-making, William saw an unsettling deviation from those principles. The rise of Laura and Tom, however subtle, seemed to bypass the very standards that Diana had cherished and fought for. In his eyes, it wasn't just inclusion, it was an invisible shift that could redefine the monarchy in ways he feared were damaging. He began noticing patterns and documenting them meticulously. Every handshake, every smile at events, every moment of quiet influence was logged in his mind, forming a map of growing power that didn't come from royal duty but from proximity and careful placement. Discussions with trusted aides were followed by private conversations with Princess Anne, who shared his understanding of what was at stake. The frustration didn't explode publicly. It simmered beneath a composed exterior, but it was potent enough to sharpen his instincts and prepare him for decisive action. The tension for William wasn't merely about etiquette or appearances, it was about preserving the monarchy's core values. He constantly asked himself, how much could the crown tolerate before the traditions he and Diana had cherished became unrecognizable? Could the monarchy survive if the lines between duty, bloodline, and personal influence blurred beyond repair? With every quiet maneuver by Camilla's children, that question grew louder, pushing him toward a confrontation that no one outside palace walls could yet anticipate. In William's mind, inaction was not an option. The crown, the legacy of his mother, and the identity of the monarchy itself were at stake. Every high-profile engagement, every whispered conversation, every subtle gesture in the corridors of power reminded him that the future he envisioned for the monarchy could not include the unchecked rise of outsiders, regardless of family ties. The stakes were personal, historic, and unavoidable. William knew that a reckoning was coming, and when it did, it would not be gentle. Anne's silent strength. Princess Anne had always been the quiet, unwavering backbone of the royal family.
Princess Anne is referred to as the hardest working royal. In addition to being involved with more than 300 charities,
Known for her discipline, consistency, and firm sense of duty, she rarely allowed emotion to cloud her judgment. Unlike many who sought attention or praise, Anne preferred to observe, analyze, and act only when necessary. She understood the intricate balance of the monarchy better than most, having spent decades navigating both its public ceremonies and private politics. Her wisdom came not from titles or pomp, but from a lifetime of first-hand experience, watching generations of royals make decisions that could either preserve or endanger the crown's legacy. For years, Anne watched quietly as the subtle shifts of influence moved around her. Camilla's children were polite, they were well-mannered, and to an outsider, their presence seemed harmless. Laura Lopes attended art exhibitions and charity events with a natural grace that allowed her to blend seamlessly with senior royals. Tom Parker Bowles remained understated, working behind the scenes, yet he often had access to informal discussions and decision-making circles. While most people would see these as ordinary family participation, Anne noticed the broader implications. This quiet rise was not about participation. It was a slow infiltration that could alter the monarchy's delicate power structure. It crossed a line she could not ignore. Anne's response was subtle but deliberate. She began to distance herself from events where Camilla's children were present, declining invitations politely and signaling through actions rather than words that inclusion in royal affairs was earned, not assumed. The palace staff quickly noticed her calculated avoidance of shared duties or appearances with Laura and Tom. It wasn't gossip or drama, it was a strategic boundary meant to reinforce the centuries-old principles of royal access and service. She was sending a message without creating public confrontation, a hallmark of her measured approach. When William, increasingly frustrated by what he saw as a creeping threat to the monarchy's integrity, sought Anne's counsel, she immediately understood his concerns. The two shared a deep sense of responsibility to protect the crown and its traditions. Together, they carefully examined the implications of Camilla's children having unregulated access to the inner workings of royal duties and decision-making. They recognized that unchecked influence, even if polite or understated, could undermine the values that generations of monarchs had maintained. Finally, Anne agreed that action was necessary. Her intervention was not born of malice or rivalry, but of duty, a genuine commitment to preserving the monarchy's heritage. When they confronted Charles, Anne's voice carried weight because it was backed by decades of service, experience, and loyalty. She spoke not as a critic, but as a guardian of the institution, conveying the importance of boundaries and the risks of ignoring the traditional rules that had long governed royal authority. William needed an ally who could bring clarity and credibility, and Anne provided exactly that. Together, they presented a united front, delivering a message that was precise, firm, and impossible to misinterpret. Anne's silent strength, cultivated over decades, became the foundation upon which decisive action could be taken. Her presence reassured William and reminded Charles that the crown's integrity was paramount, surpassing personal relationships or individual desires. In that moment, Anne was not merely a princess. She was the voice of the monarchy's conscience, a reminder that duty, loyalty, and tradition could never be compromised, no matter how subtle the encroachment. The confrontation that shook the palace, the meeting that unfolded behind those gilded doors, was unlike anything the palace had seen in years. It was private, but the energy inside the room was so charged that those who passed by later swore they could feel the weight of it pressing through the walls. Charles entered, expecting a conversation, perhaps even a disagreement, but what awaited him was a storm of conviction, one that would test both his heart and his crown. Prince William spoke first, his words steady but laced with emotion.
Public, the Prince of Wales will need to keep those alleged tantrums in check when he ascends the throne. Prince William was dubbed Work-Shy William.
He carried not only his own burden, but the shadow of Diana, a mother who had once warned against losing the monarchy's soul to personal choices. Every sentence William delivered carried that ghostly reminder, and it pierced Charles deeper than he could show. His voice wasn't raised, but the firmness in his tone left no room for escape. Camilla's family influence could no longer be tolerated. Anne, seated with her trademark composure, became the immovable force in the room. She didn't need to shout. Her silence between words was sharper than any outburst. When she finally spoke, her words were clear, clipped, and irrefutable. The monarchy belonged to blood, service, and sacrifice, not quiet maneuvers from those who had never taken the oath of duty. For Charles, it was a dagger of truth wrapped in loyalty. The clash was not merely about Tom Parker Bowles or Laura Lopes being seen at events. It was about symbolism. To William and Anne, every handshake, every seat offered at the royal table, every casual inclusion in decision-making was a step toward rewriting unspoken laws that had kept the monarchy intact for centuries. They were not asking Charles to choose between his wife and his children. They were demanding that he choose between the crown and the comfort of his private life. Witnesses say Charles sat in silence for long moments, his hands trembling slightly as he clasped them together. His eyes glistened, torn between love and legacy. He remembered the long years when Camilla was his only refuge, the woman who stood by him when the world seemed against him. To push away her children now would feel like betrayal, not just of them, but of her. And yet, before him stood William, the future king.
In the event that William takes the throne, he will receive the title of king along with the responsibilities of the crown.
And Anne, the pillar of duty, both united in their demand. The room's air grew heavy with unspoken history. Charles's tears fell not from weakness, but from the cruel realization that kingship often demands the sacrifice of personal happiness. His voice cracked as he admitted the conflict tearing him apart. He was both a father and a sovereign, a husband and a ruler. But as king, his first duty was to the institution that had stood for 1,000 years. The confrontation stretched for hours, each side refusing to yield. At times, voices rose, William's frustration boiling over, Charles defending his right to love freely. At other times, silence cut deeper than words, with Anne's gaze reminding him of the quiet strength the monarchy required. By the end, a painful resolution emerged. Charles agreed, reluctantly but decisively, to pull Camilla's children back from the royal forefront. It was not an exile, but a boundary. No more hidden influence, no more blurred lines between family affection and constitutional authority. The decision was strategic, but for Charles, it was also deeply personal. He was not merely a husband making concessions, he was a king bowing to the unyielding weight of tradition. Those inside the palace later whispered that history itself shifted that night. A private heartbreak had become a public safeguard, and the echo of that confrontation would linger far beyond the gilded doors where it began. The fallout and public reaction. When whispers of the confrontation escaped the palace walls, they spread like wildfire. It began with carefully worded articles in the press, phrases like tensions behind the scenes and firm boundaries set by senior royals appeared in headlines, but it wasn't long before the truth began to surface. The clash between Charles, William, and Anne over the influence of Camilla's children became the story that dominated conversations from Buckingham Palace to the smallest pubs across Britain. Social media platforms lit up instantly, like Protect the Crown, William and Anne, and Monarchy First, trended within hours. Thousands of users applauded William's resolve and Anne's unwavering firmness, calling them the true guardians of royal tradition. For many, it was a relief to see the monarchy protecting its core values. Comments poured in, "This is what Diana would have wanted." Finally, someone standing up for bloodline and service, Anne has always been the backbone of the family. The public sentiment was clear. This was not a cruel act against Camilla's children, but a necessary step to preserve the monarchy's identity. In contrast, defenders of Camilla voiced their sadness. A smaller yet passionate group argued that Laura Lopes and Tom Parker Bowles were being punished simply for their mother's marriage. They noted that both had lived private lives, away from scandal, and questioned why the palace felt threatened by their presence. But their voices were drowned out by the overwhelming majority who insisted that influence without duty had no place in royal circles. Inside the palace, the fallout was more delicate. Camilla herself was shaken. For years, she had worked to move from the other woman to queen consort, carefully shaping her image and slowly bringing her children into respectable proximity to royal life. Now, in one decisive stroke, that quiet foundation was dismantled. Courtiers noticed her retreating into the background, accepting fewer public engagements, choosing smaller, more private appearances, and leaning heavily on Charles for support. Where she once carried quiet confidence, there was now a visible fragility. Charles, too, bore the scars of the decision. He appeared older, more tired, and at times visibly distracted in public. Those close to him whispered that the confrontation with William and Anne had cut deeply, not because he doubted their reasoning, but because he felt torn between his role as king and his loyalty as a husband. Yet, despite his personal pain, he did not reverse the course. The crown demanded consistency, and he gave it. For William and Anne, the aftermath brought a surge of respect. Their decision was viewed not as rebellion, but as leadership. Even critics of the monarchy acknowledged their foresight. Analysts pointed out that by reinforcing lineage, service, and tradition, they had reminded the world why the institution still mattered in a rapidly changing society. Their actions reassured monarchists who feared the crown was bending too much to modern compromises. The ripple effects went beyond Britain. International media reported the story with fascination, noting how the royal family once again revealed its ability to adapt and survive by protecting its ancient codes. Across the Commonwealth, where debates about the relevance of monarchy are ongoing, the decision was cited as proof that the Windsors still valued discipline and structure. Yet beneath the praise lingered a sobering truth. This victory for tradition came at a personal cost. Camilla's smile, once confident, seemed thinner. Charles, once hopeful for a blended family acceptance, now carried an unspoken sorrow. The balance of power had shifted firmly into the hands of William and Anne, but it was a reminder that survival for the monarchy often demanded sacrifice, sometimes of the very people within its own walls. In the end, the public saw strength, unity, and guardianship of tradition. Inside the palace, however, it was a quieter story of strained relationships, private heartbreak, and the heavy weight of choosing the crown over comfort. The confrontation between Charles, William, and Anne wasn't just a family disagreement, it was a pivotal moment that defined the modern monarchy. The decision to end Camilla's family influence sent a message about the importance of duty, heritage, and responsibility. Charles's tears reflected not weakness, but the heavy burden of balancing love and obligation. William and Anne's actions reinforced the principle that the crown must remain grounded in tradition and service. Camilla's withdrawal showed the human cost of these decisions, proving that even royalty is not immune to heartbreak. What do you think? Did Charles make the right choice, or was this an unfair betrayal of his family? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the hidden drama of the royal family, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell to stay updated with more exclusive royal stories. Stay tuned, because we'll continue uncovering the moments behind palace walls that shape history in ways the public never sees.